So good evening to everyone and welcome back to the second part of the systematic introduction to the Buddhist path led by Ayyā Suvīrā. So pleased and honoured to have her here to lead us on this journey for us to learn more about the Buddha's teachings directly from the suttas. So we've got a lot to get through, which is fantastic. Some things that you may want to know about. One is that if you don't already have the document that we'll be going through, I will include that in the chat box. So use the chat box for any information that I'll be sending through, including that file. I'll upload that there shortly. I'll also include there some information about Metta Rama, where Ayyā Suvīrā is staying. And if you'd like to support Metta Rama, I'll also put in there the account details for any donations as well, which will be greatly appreciated. I'll also put in the chat some information about Metta Centre. If you haven't heard about us, then you can also find out more about that there. Now, the chat section is going to be important too. So along the way, if you have any questions or any comments, we like to make this very interactive. So use the chat function to ask questions, answer Ayyā Suvīrā's questions as well. She loves asking us questions to make sure we're listening and paying attention. And so use the chat box. And also this session is going to be recorded and then it will be uploaded on YouTube. If you missed last week's talk, I will also include the link to last week's talk that we've uploaded on YouTube as well for you to check out. So without further ado, please join me as we welcome Ayyā Suvīrā to give us this Dhamma talk. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I'm really happy to see everyone who stayed on this evening. So let's begin by saying Namo Tassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So obviously that's a traditional way of beginning a Buddhist talk. And it's just paying homage to our original teacher, the Buddha. So I'll just screen share so you can all see what's on my screen. And Tina mentioned she thought there were some questions that we didn't really get a chance to look at last week. I thought I had spoken to them, but whether I actually answered them properly or not is a different matter. So I think one of the questions was about about rebirth. So if, say for example in the dependent origination sequence, it gives Sankara or will, intention, as the preceding cause of rebirth. So, why was I saying things like I can't decide whether I want to be reborn if will is the cause of rebirth? And what I was explaining was that, it's an automatic process. And the Buddha actually gave a definition of suffering in the Satyavibhanga Sutta, in the Majjhima Nikaya. What is suffering? Suffering's that even though we might want not to be reborn, you can't get these things just by wishing for them. So, sure, yes, intention does lead to rebirth, but we can't, we don't will the whole system into existence. In the words of J. Garfield, we're not actually that powerful. So that's what I was trying to express. So I hope I have actually expressed that correctly. Because say, if we have the karma to be reborn in a heavenly realm, we can't will it to be otherwise. It's going to play out according to its natural course. And the other thing that was there that again I spoke to, but did I answer it? Different question is we had the question is it was about suffering. So I forget the exact question. So maybe the question was something along the lines of, is the world suffering, or is it attachment to the world that's suffering? And I just wanted to go back to the text. So when we see statements like here, if you can all see my screen, we have statements like...
No.
Okay, can't all see my screen? Back up. Screen sharing. Okay. Share. So you should be able to...
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Now, where we have statements like rebirth is suffering, jati dukkha. Actually, this kind of construction in Pali is used to express... it's nearly like that second word, dukkha. It's actually called nominal apposition, where we have noun A is noun B. In this case, noun B is a characteristic of noun A. So where we say rebirth is suffering, like the actual Pali construction is that suffering is a characteristic of rebirth, because otherwise maybe, you might tie your head in these kind of strange knots, thinking, is there something externally in the world, that's called aging, that exists by itself independently of me, that's somehow suffering? And I mean, if you were going down that path of doing it, actually, what we should understand here is that all of these things have the characteristic of suffering. So, and, some of these things, whether we're attached to them or not, it's going to be suffering because that some of them are just physiological processes involved with getting older and so on. And I mentioned the example of Devadatta. Famously, he tried to murder the Buddha with a boulder, but only the splinter went in the Buddha's foot. So, the Buddha was awakened, but that's still suffering, and we call that dukkha dukkha. It's suffering as suffering. So, it's not just our attachment to these things that makes them suffering. There is something involved in the khandhas, in the 5 components of our body and mind, that is, there's things there that are inherently, that have this characteristic of suffering. So I think we can continue with the text. So we're reading from this is the Mahasatipatthana Sutta in the Digha Nikaya. This is the extended definition section. So we got up to the end of this first paragraph and we ended at, in short, the 5 components of existence, the 5 khandhas, and brackets that fully describe your body and mind. See how convenient explanations in the brackets are suffering, i.e., they have the characteristic of suffering. I mean, we have this construction in English too, when we say roses are red, it's an adjective. And what is rebirth? In whatever type of beings, of whatever species of beings, there is rebirth, coming to be, coming forth, the appearance of the khandhas, the acquisition of the senses, that is called rebirth. So again, pretty straightforward definition of the meaning of birth. In defining rebirth in the Noble Truth of Suffering, as it's given, say, for example, in the Buddha's first sermon in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So rebirth is suffering. And just in case you were tempted to think this, it could be any type of birth, it doesn't necessarily mean more than one life, or, if you were tempted to think actually maybe it's like momentary rebirth where things are reborn from moment to moment. Actually, the Buddha has given us some lovely similes here. Just to make sure that you are 100% clear that actually what is meant is the appearance of the khandhas and the acquisition of the senses. So birth in the very normal sense. And what is aging? In whatever type of beings, of whatever species of beings, there is aging, decrepitude. See some nice words here, decrepitude. Broken teeth, grey hair, wrinkled skin, shrinking with age, decay of the senses, that's called aging. So maybe we're all very familiar with that one. And what is death in whatever type of beings, of whatever species of beings, there is a passing away, demise, a disappearance, a death, a dying, a decease, a destruction of the khandhas, a discarding of the body, that is called death. So death as we normally understand it. And what is sorrow? Whenever by any kind of misfortune anyone is affected by something of a painful nature, sorrow, mourning, anguish, grief, unhappiness, that is called sorrow. And what is lamentation? Whenever by any kind of misfortune anyone is affected by something of a painful nature, and there is a crying out, weeping, making much noise for grief, wailing, that is called lamentation. And what is pain? Whatever painful feeling results from bodily contact, that is called pain. And what is unhappiness? Whatever mental painful feeling arises from the mind, that is called unhappiness. So we also have the very famous simile of the two arrows. So the first arrow is the physical affliction. The second arrow is it's the mental painful feelings that go with that. And what is distress? Whenever by any kind of misfortune anguish arises from something of a painful or unpleasant nature, that is called distress. And what is experiencing what is unpleasant? Whoever has unwanted, disliked, unpleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, or mind objects, or whoever meets those who wish you harm, cause you discomfort or insecurity, that is called experiencing what is unpleasant. So I'm sure we've all encountered some unwanted, disliked, unpleasant objects. So, not that uncommon. And what is missing, what is pleasing? Whoever has pleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, or mind objects, or whoever encounters well wishes, those who provide you with comfort or security, such as family or friends, and then is deprived of such interaction or connection, that is called missing what is pleasing. So your family was on the other side of the border during lockdown, you can't see them, and you get deprived of that interaction or connection. So the Buddha's given that as part of the definition of suffering. You can't always get, you can't always see the things that are pleasing to you. And what is not getting what one wants? In being subject to birth, this desire arises. Oh, that we were not subject to birth, that we might never be reborn. But this cannot be gained by desire. That is not getting what one wants. So, like I mentioned previously, this is the same expression that's in the Satyavibbanga Sutta, but here it's in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta in the definition section. This expression, what it's saying is that you can't just wish not to be reborn. And that's the part of the definition of suffering, but this cannot be gained by desire. So, not within our control. In being subject to aging, to disease, to death, to sorrow, lamentation, pain, negativity, and distress they may want, oh, that we were not subject to aging, to disease, to death, to sorrow, to lamentation, pain, negativity, and distress, that we might not come to these things. But this cannot be gained by wanting. This is not getting what one wants. So, Ajahn Brahm likes to talk about this a lot, but we're not actually in control. Over these aspects of our world, if we were in control, we'd fix everything up, would make everything nice and perfect in the way we wanted it. But what the Buddha is saying is that actually that whole project is doomed to failure, because you can't just make it nice. You can't get rid of these fundamentally unpleasant things about life that are just completely outside of our control. And he's not saying that to be pessimistic, because actually very soon we're getting towards the path out. And what Buddhism emphasizes is this sense of samvega. Vega being speed, sang being, it's an intensifying prefix. This with great speed, with complete speed. Sang can mean like, together, very comprehensive. So this idea of Samvega is, we have this emotion which turns us away from the world and which turns us towards liberation. I mean, in some Asian languages, the word Samvega is used a little bit differently. It might have a different emotional tone, but when it's used in Pali, that's what we mean. It's that emotion which turns us away from the whole realm of sensory experience. So you might say like dispassion. So it's a cooling feeling. So the khandhas are hot, that Samvega is cooling. So I'll just get my screen up so I can see the chat again. I have to apologize. I'm a little bit late to the whole Zoom thing, but I'm learning. So at least this week we got sound. Anyway, I can't. There we go. More chat. Okay, great. So Zen's just shared some videos about research with kids from past lives. I mean, I know people. I've known academics who had kids, and their kid, has talked about their previous family, and the parents told them to, be quiet. Don't talk like that. Don't talk about going home to, your previous mum. I'm your mum now. So I mean, it happens. But Jim Tucker's what am I looking at? Quite interesting. And I mean, Zen shared the panel of psychologists from the University of Virginia. The University of Virginia being one of the very few universities in the world that is willing to do evidence-based research on like the psychological aspects of reincarnation memories. So I'm sure that's something you could all look at if you wanted to. And I mean, also quite interesting because, I mean, Jim Tucker's predecessor, Ian Stevenson, also had some quite good books, like, for example, Where Biology and Reincarnation Intersect, which has the photos. Like, for example, say in Africa, they have this concept of returner children in some countries in West Africa, where they feel that the child's deliberately being reborn in a family again and again and again. And what they want to tell the child is, please stop being reborn and dying young. We want you to actually grow up next time. So they have this custom of actually deliberately cutting the child's finger to discourage them from dying young. I mean, not endorsing this particular custom, but that's just the custom they have in some of these groups, in tribal groups in West Africa. And it's interesting because when Ian Stevenson's done this research and photo documentation, what they can actually see is the kids coming back. When they come back, their fingers also have the deformity, because in the previous life, before the child passed away, the parents have actually done that. So it's made some kind of psychic impression. So, I mean, in terms of like the whole reincarnation research genre, I'd say Where Biology and Reincarnation Intersect is definitely my favorite, because it has the photos that quite often match up this, the birth defects or the scarification to like the individual's memories. I mean, like, belief in rebirth itself is very widespread globally, throughout Asia, the Middle East, some parts of Africa, North America. It's very much a widely held belief. Anyway, so Elise says, thanks for sharing. So was there any questions about the content? I mean, to me, the content all looked fairly straightforward, so I'm happy to keep on moving on if you're all happy. But yeah, as before, If there's anything, just put it directly in the chat and we'll deal with questions as we go, because it keeps things a little bit lively. And I mean, part of the reason too, okay, there are large black squares on the screen. That sounds bad. You know why there are large black squares on the screen, Doug? I think it's because I have my Zoom, I have the Zoom chat open. So if you can see black on my screen, that may be the Zoom chat. So what I'll do, I'll close it so you don't get the black. You know, and does anyone know the reason why the Buddha's given us this particular sequence of 4? I'm guessing some of you might. So like, is there an underlying logic? Like why do we have these 4 things where we've started by talking about all of like the horrible bad things first? Would anyone like to inform us?
You can feel free to pop into the chat your answers. And it's okay. There's no right, like there's no fear that if you write something, we're not going to reprimand you or anything.
No, it's just a discussion. So you can all chill. I mean, you're also welcome to unmute too. But I'm sure some of you may have actually heard of this. So I'm just waiting for someone to share. Why do we have 4 noble truths and not 3 noble truths or 2 noble truths or 1 noble truth? I mean, that'd be like pretty interesting, like the one truth. Okay, so I mean, if genuinely, okay, Adrian says it's based on Ayurvedic medicine. Is that right, Ayya? That is correct, Adrian. So this is actually a medical diagnosis, a schema. Is that the right word, schema? A scheme that's come from medicine. So what we're starting with, this is, we're starting from number 1 in this scheme, which is the symptom, the disease. So the Buddha is giving us the diagnosis. This is this is the disease. So thanks so much, Adrian. That's very, very helpful that you've shared that. So continuing on, again, so we're moving on to a new topic, the 5 components of existence, the Kunda. So I mentioned previously, Kunda is like a hill, a heath, or a mountain. And we're still reading from the Digha Nikaya 22 in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. And how in particular...
Sorry to interrupt, but there's still the black screen in the black box in the middle of the screen, so we can't read any of the text.
That's troubling because I don't know why there's a black box in the middle of the screen.
Would you be able to just turn off, just for them now, just turn off the share screen and then just start again? Perhaps we could start that way.
Can do.
Thank you. So you're still sharing screen, so maybe stop sharing for now.
Yeah, I've stopped sharing.
Thank you.
So I'm going to...
Again. And then you don't have to share your whole screen, just share that document.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do then. I'm just going to share one document. Okay, Michael says he would suggest minimizing the windows behind as well. Okay, can do.
Well, I think if you just share that one screen, it doesn't matter what else is happening on your laptop. We will only see that one screen.
Okay.
Thanks. That one window.
I come from a forest monastery. I didn't actually own a mobile phone for about like 6 or 7 years. And after I came here to Sydney, I had to modernize and get the mobile. So I'm slowly getting back into the world of technology.
That still seems like you're sharing your whole screen.
Okay. It's given me the option share desktop, share whiteboard.
Yeah, don't share the desktop because we can now see all the black boxes.
Okay, so I'm on advanced, share portion of screen.
Yeah, so just share that website. No, that's sharing a portion of it. Or alternatively, would you like me to share my screen and that if you just send me the link?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay.
But I mean, you should be able to see that now, yeah? So what I'm sharing is actually the correct screen. Michael's nodding. If you can all see that, we could just keep going.
Okay, we can keep going, but I can still see the black on the on the right, which is okay. I don't think it's blocking any words, but yeah, we'll see.
In that case, I'll just keep going. But in the meantime, Tina, the link for the document, it'll be on the Metta website under Dharma program.
I've got the document, but it looks like that is from Sutta Central, what you're reading from.
What I'm reading from is from, it's from page 8 of the document.
Okay, all right. Then let me do mine. Hang on. That may be easier. So if you just stop sharing your screen and then I can share mine.
Great, thanks.
Okay, can everyone see that document? And I'm on page 8.
No, I can't see it.
Oh, someone's paused my screen. Hang on. Okay, how about now?
Yes.
Okay, so just let me know how you want me to maneuver it. This is page 8. Okay.
That's great. So if you could just scroll down a little, we'll keep reading from the 5 components of existence, the Kunda.
Okay. Next page.
This is fine.
Okay.
So, and how in particular are the 5 components of existence suffering? They are as follows: the body rupa, experience Vedana, perception sanya, aka will, and other mental formations. Sorry, I've read that incorrectly. I've passed it wrong. So starting again, they are as follows: the body rupa, experience Vedana, perception sanya, will and other mental formations, Sankara, and consciousness, vijnana. These are the 5 components of existence that are suffering, and that is called the noble truth of suffering. So I mentioned the other day about how in Buddhism, one of the great innovations of Buddhism was to take this kind of complex biological, psychological reality we call the mind and body and actually break it up into some meaningful categories. And this had happened previously in the Upanishads. In the Upanishads, there's something called kosha theory or sheaf theory, where you have this idea of a composite person made of sheaths. But it's not exactly the same scheme. This particular scheme is unique to Buddhism. So we have the body rupa. Rupa can also mean something a bit like an image or a form. Like in grammar, when you make words, you can talk about like the rupa of the words, the shape of the word formation. But here it just means the body. But, it's nice to have that in the back of your head that this word could equally be translated as image or form. Experience Vedana. So Vedana is just the things you feel or perceive. Perception, sanya. And we just mentioned Vedana. because, you know, in Buddhism, we have these lovely categories where we break things down. So actually we can talk about 2 types of Vedana. We can talk about mental and physical Vedana. We can talk about 5 types of Vedana, 6 types of Vedana, 18 types, 36 types, 108 types. So, you know, the Buddha has really given a very comprehensive classification of what Vedana is. We have perception, sanya. So perception is that which cognizes, from this root nya, meaning to know, plus the prefix sang, meaning together. So, I mean, like perception sees light and dark. That's what perception is. Will and other mental formations, sankara. This is a bit of a funny word because, you know, something that is sankata is constructed. So again, sang meaning together, ka, I think it has the sense of like to construct or make something. But a sankara could be, you know, we should have the image of something like a house that's been built up. So when it just says mental formations, it's a bit like, to me, this is very confusing language, because when we say a formation, it doesn't really translate into anything in English. Like, what's a formation? You know, nobody thinks up a formation. It doesn't have a natural correspondence to anything we use in idiomatic English. So, I mean, some synonyms for sankara are also cetana, the will. So sankara is like the volitional, actively constructing, doing elements of our mind. And these days, Ajahn Brahm, he very much, he just calls it the will, because that's mostly what we mean when we're talking about sankara. And consciousness is vijnana. And Ajahn has kindly beautified the English for us here to indicate that actually in Buddhism we have 6 consciousnesses. You know, they're sometimes compared to different animals that are tied together. So, for example, in the Chapanika Sutta, that, you know, in some Buddhist countries, like in Thailand, the word vinyan can mean a ghost. But here I think it's probably giving it the more technical sense of vijnana is that which knows. And this prefix V has the sense of like discriminatively, you know, it divides and knows. And again, nya being related to our English word to know. So these are the 5 components of existence that are suffering. And that is called the noble truth of suffering. Okay, so we have some comments in the chat about that. Is sankara the same as samsara? That's from Carolyn. So thank you, Carolyn, for asking that. So sankara is our intention or our will. You know, it's our actively, you know, we construct thoughts. Confusingly, it can also be the things that are constructed. So sankara, you know, it can refer to both the things we construct and the things that are constructed. But is it the same as samsara? Basically, no. Samsara is what we call the wandering on. So, you know, samsara, you know, it's also our conditioned reality. I mean, it's not something that exists out there that we wander on in. You know, it is the process of delusive thinking that, you know, also that, you know, we also traverse through in the world. That these words aren't complete synonyms. So samsara is more like the wandering on. Sankara is our intention or will. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Vedana is traditionally translated as sensations or feelings. I notice here it is translated as experience. Can you comment on the difference in translation and how this impacts on our understanding of it? Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? That looks like Ajahn Brahm to me. I feel that Ajahn has definitely been doing something here. So let's have a look and see why he's doing what he's doing.
I suppose why I ask this is because traditionally it is generally translated as sensations and feelings, and experience is very different as a word and and the meaning that's ascribed to it. So I just was curious why this was translated in this way.
No, I'm curious now too.
Okay, it's not just me then, because it's the first time I've seen it translated in such a way.
Yeah, no, it's the first time for me too. I mean, sometimes you see different things with sanya because there is a type of like tradition, especially in the Thai tradition, where they do sanya as being memory, and it gets a bit confusing, especially if you're dealing with content from Thailand, where you suddenly see like sanya as memory.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why it's developed that way in the Thai tradition, but I personally think that perception's better.
Yeah.
But in terms of Vedana being experience, I know what is going on actually. It's probably because of the verb, because this verb vedati, there are places where it does actually combine with certain prefixes to have a tone that is closer to experience rather than feeling. I'm just thinking, for example, in the Satipatthana Sutta, the verb like pati samvedati, like you experience this type of thing or that type of thing.
Yeah. I noticed in a few paragraphs down, we will come across this again. So maybe that will inform us as to why it's translated as experience then. Yeah.
But I think if you look at some of the very stereotypical definitions of Vedana, I mentioned, the 2 types, 5 types, 6 types, 18 types, 36 types, 108 types. The type of words that are co-locating with Vedana, they're things like, we get terms like Sukha Vedana, the happy experience, Dukkha Vedana, the unpleasant experience, I have to get it right now, but I've become Asukhang Vedana, like the experience that's neither painful nor pleasant. So these are, sure, with like the text says experience here, but also feeling is quite a legitimate way of translating this, because when we think about feeling, we do think about pleasant and unpleasant feeling tones.
Yeah.
But I can actually email Ajahn and ask him why he's gone for this in particular, because most of Ajahn retranslations I've encountered them before, but this one is just eluding me a little bit.
It'll be interesting to know because, of course, Vedana also intersects with dependent origination. And so the Vedana in dependent origination, most of the times it's translated as feelings in the sense of unpleasant, pleasant, or neutral feelings, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. So if it is to be considered as experience, then that will also impact on how dependent origination is understood as well. So perhaps if we find out, we can share this next time in class.
Sure, I'm very happy to email Ajahn and ask. But I mean, I don't think it substantially changes that much though, because it's just the scope that's a little bit broader. Because like I said, the verb that goes with this, like vedati, it can actually have that sense of experience already. So there is definitely a tone of, this is something experiential that happens in, in the kandas. Anyway, so moving forward. So we're at reading from the Majjhima Nikaya. Lady, is that fuel of Adana the same as these 5 components of existence, or is that the fuel something apart from the 5 components of existence? Friend Visakha, that fuel is neither the same as the 5 components of existence, nor is the fuel separate from the 5 components of existence. It is the desire and wanting that is part of these 5 components of existence that is the fuel that sustains them. So this looks like the bhikkhunī arahant Dhammadina teaching her former husband Visakha, that's male Visakha with the short a, in response to his questions. So what she's asked about the fuel. So, the definition of fuel being the desire and wanting that is part of these 5 components of existence is the fuel that sustains them. So I think the reason, it looks like a bit sudden, the jump in the text, why are we talking about khandas and then suddenly talking about upadana? Because, in the definition of the Noble Truth of Suffering that's given, say, for example, in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, what is suffering? It's the upadana khanda, it's the khandas that have been taken up. And this word upadana, it could actually just mean taking up in English. So the khandas as we've taken them up. So just a little definition of what it means to take them up. So moving on, any kind of body whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the body component of existence. All bodies should be seen as they are with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. So it looks like we've skipped a bit again too. We're now in the Buddha's second discourse. This looks like the Anathalakkana Sutta. So in the first discourse, the Buddha taught the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta at the deer park in Isipatana. And, as a result of teaching that discourse, one of the monks attained stream entry. So Anyakandanya attained what's called the Dhamma eye, meaning, in Sri Lankan you say sowan, in Pali you say sotapanna. So he attained the first level of awakening. So after the teaching of the second discourse, which is this Anathalakkana Sutta, that was when the first arahants arose after the Buddha. So anatta being non-self, an being a negative prefix meaning not, atta being atma, the self. So lakkhana being the characteristic. So very important discourse, the discourse on the characteristic of non-self. So we'll keep reading. Any kind of experience, Vedana, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the experience component of existence. All experience should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. So in Pali, neso mama, neso hamasmi, neso me atati. So permanent essence here being atta, the self. It could have equally said this is not myself, and many translations do actually read that way. Any kind of perception, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the perception component of existence. All perception should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. So the things, we perceive, sanya, also not mine. So we've had rupa not mine, vedana not mine, sanya not mine, and sankara also not mine. Any kind of will and other mental formations, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the will and mental formations component of existence. All will should be seen as they really are. Is that correct subject verb agreement? Anyway, all willing should be seen as it really is, with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. So all of our intentions, all of those lovely things that we think are ours, all of our thinking, all of the things we want, again, not ours. Any kind of consciousness, whatever, whether past, future, or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. This is the consciousnesses component of existence. All consciousnesses should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. Okay, that's pretty deep. So like I said, this is actually the Buddha's second discourse ever. And we just had a question from Noveline. What does it mean by far or near in any kind of rupa, vedana? So let's have a look. So whether past, future, or present, so atita, anagata, paccuppanna. So in the three times. So that's meant to be comprehensive in respect of time, one's own or others. So ajatava, bahidava. So, whether it's your khandhas, other people's khandhas, whether it's past, future, or present khandhas, it's all non-self, gross or subtle. So, no matter what type of body you have, whether it's a kind of deva body or, a normal human body, it's all also not yourself, inferior or superior. Again, I think that's just a way of rephrasing the same thing. Far or near, again, comprehensive in respect of space. So, whether your body's on the moon or whether your body's here, it's going to be the same thing. But what all of these qualifiers are giving, actually, they're just meant to give a comprehensive account. There's a lot of words there, but what it's really saying is just all of it, the whole lot. Like there is nothing excluded. There is no case that the Buddha's not talking about or not including here. So it's not the case that that somewhere out there, if you look hard enough, there's there's a beautiful type of consciousness, for example, that if I get this one type of consciousness, it's never going to change. It's mine, it's me. So that's what the Buddha's really trying to say. This is meant to be a very comprehensive list. So I hope that answers your question, Noveline. Okay, great. Because, even though it looks easy on the page, if you understand this, to really understand it, it does actually entail some degree of awakening, at least according to the way I was taught, because, what's actually meant by acquiring view, it's part of the definition of the first level of awakening as taught by the Buddha. So we talk about stream entry as acquiring right view. So when we come into Buddhism, we have a degree of trying to understand what the Buddha's teachings are. That at the time of awakening, at least to Sotapanna, what we acquire is that experiential knowledge of right view. So if you are not a Sotapanna, that means at present, right now, we don't necessarily have a full experiential understanding of what this actually means, because what we like to do in particular, it might be easy for us to say, sure, this body isn't mine. Like it's not really a hard thing to do, because, you know, we're all adults. We've all had to come to terms with the fact that we are actually going to die, that we can get sick and we don't have any choice in it. You know, there is no type of like super diet that's going to prevent us from, you know, from dying. The body does strange things that aren't really within our control. And hopefully most of us have already come to terms with that, because if we haven't, it's a bit dysfunctional, right? Like, you know, people, I did actually work for a person like this once, who was like, I've never gotten sick, I've never taken a day off work, I will never get sick. And like that degree of wanting to actually control your body, of feeling that you're in charge, like that's ego, yeah? You know, where you think I'm invincible. So hopefully most of us already have that out of our systems. And, you know, so like there are parts of it that aren't that difficult. So we've had Rupa Vedana, so our feeling isn't ours. And maybe this is where people start not to follow a little bit, because, you know, we like to think I can feel whatever I want to feel. You know, if I want to feel happy, I can feel happy. But it's, again, it's not really the case. We don't have complete control over how we feel. You know, sometimes we feel unpleasant things, and that's just completely outside of our control. You know, if we feel happy things, nice things, it's not within our control to lengthen that feeling, or to say I'm only ever going to feel this. So quite a useful thing to realize if you're doing meditation retreat. You know, the type of feelings we have in meditation, we can't actually say I'm going to feel completely happy for the whole retreat. It's just not going to happen. You know, there's going to be other feelings that may happen during that time too, because it's just like, again, not within our control. And actually saying I'm going to go on this meditation retreat, like the whole time I'm going to feel nothing but pure bliss and happiness, actually that's ego. And the Buddha is saying, you know, please don't think that way, because like that's just really egotistical. Like the causes and conditions that are leading you to feel this way are complex. And, you know, we're not gods. We're not like Ishvara. We're not like the Supreme Lord where we can say this is what my, you know, I'm just always going to be 100% perfectly happy. Any kind of perception, whatever, whether past, future, or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the perception component of existence. So again, hopefully it should be more or less straightforward, but, you know, when it comes to actually psychologically realizing it, you know, we get a bit stuck. You know, on one hand, we might say, sure, I know, right? I can't see whatever I want to see. But then when it comes to reality, you know, what do? We do and feel the exact opposite. We start wishing, you know, if I just managed to game the system right, I'd only see the things I wanted to see. But there is no way. You know, we perceive things that we don't want to perceive. And again, in terms of, you know, meditation, right? We think, you know, may I always perceive like the brilliant bright light? May I always perceive the nimitta? And again, you know, this type of desire, it's Ajahn Brahm calls it being a control freak. We do not actually have control over what we perceive because of complex causality. Any kind of will and other mental formations, whatever, whether past, future, or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior, superior, far or near. So all should be seen as they really are with correct wisdom thus. And again, this really gets people, because people, they think, right, the things that I do, the things that I create with my mind, all of my thoughts, you know, Sankara can really be a thought, right? It's something we've constructed and we've put together in our head. All of my memories, so the things that I have thought previously and then previously constructed. You know, we like to think, you know, this is something I have control over. But again, you know, it should be evident on analysis that we don't, because no one can say I'm only ever going to think a particular thought. You know, sometimes the things that we're thinking, you know, just really, they're not, like, they don't answer to us. Again, which should be very evident if you do ever have the opportunity to do meditation retreat, because at some point during the retreat, you know, you might think things that you don't particularly want to think, but still it's there and you have to deal with it. And if people start getting into this trap of thinking I should have complete control over what I'm thinking 100% of the time, again, it kind of gets into that like overlord territory, like, you know, a little bit egotistical, because a lot of the stuff that comes up isn't necessarily stuff we would choose to think. So, you know, even the things we're intending, not fully up to us. Which isn't to say there's not such a thing as intention. You know, if you read some of the textbooks, it says in Buddhism, we have qualified free will, that, you know, there's something as will, but it has conditions that lead up to it. But, you know, if you've ever listened to Ajahn Brahm, qualified free will isn't really free will, because, you know, it's qualified, it's dependently arisen. So any kind of consciousness whatsoever, etc. as before. So all consciousnesses should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. And this one is a bit harder to get a hand on even conceptually, let alone psychologically, because, you know, we kind of have this reflexive, intuitive error where we think because I'm thinking, there must be someone there who's doing the thinking, because, you know, there's things being created, there must be like a kind of ghost in the machine that's driving, and this thing, the ghost that's driving, you know, that's really me. I'm you know, there has to be like someone in there, but what the Buddha is saying is actually no, you know, your conscious awareness, again, it's also dependently conditioned, it's just a part of nature. And this is really common even within Buddhism, to say, you know, there's some type of mind consciousness out there that's permanent, you know, it's just always going to exist, and, you know, once we're awakened, we're going to access this kind of permanent, beautiful mind consciousness where everything's going to be happy all the time. And the Buddha's basically saying, no, it's not like that. You know, the consciousnesses you have, they're not yours either. And we can see that quite easily, because, you know, none of us can actually will ourselves to be conscious. We can't will ourselves out of consciousness. So not within our control. And in terms of consciousnesses, Ajahn Brahm says it's like having 6 telephones on the desk. You know, consciousness isn't one solid entity. It's, you know, it's the consciousness that arises via the 5 sense doors, plus the consciousness that arises via the mind. So the Buddha really showing some genius actually in separating something very complex up into its individual parts. And it says actually in the Milinda Panha, you know, talking about the Buddha's skill in doing this, it says, if you were to take some water from the ocean and ask someone, did it come from the Ganges? Did it come from the Yamuna? You know, how could you separate it out? It would be very difficult. And in the Milinda Panha, this dialogue between the monk Nagasena and the Indo-Greek king Menanda, that's why it's called the Milinda Panha. Milinda is just Pali for Menanda. You know, Nagasena says, Venerable Nagasena says, actually, the Buddha was like this. The Buddha was like someone who could take the cupful of the ocean water and say, this is which river each bit of water came from. So it's really quite remarkable to see this type of analysis. So are we okay with the that section there from the Anattalakkhana Sutta? Because, you know, actually being okay with this is kind of like the whole point of Buddhism. I take it as my personal life's work to be okay with the sutta. So I was hoping you'd have questions. Okay, so Elise says, if we don't have control or choice over will or intention, how do we cultivate right intention? So how do we cultivate right intention? Sammasankappa being the intentions of non-ill will, non-harming, and the intention of renunciation. So in Pali, abhyapada. Gosh, I haven't taught since October, getting rusty. Vihimsa. And please someone correct me, is it vihimsa or is it avihimsa? Anyway, the intention of non-harming, like in modern Hindi, you just say ahimsa. And the intention of renunciation, which is nekama. So these three, they form sammasankappa, or right intention in the Noble Eightfold Path. So if we don't have control or choice over will or intention, how do we cultivate right intention? So there is something, which is called will. So we can, we can, like, there is such a thing as intention, but, if we were to say, can I only ever have this particular intention? May it last forever. May it always be the way I want it to be. We can't do that. So it's important to recognize that even when we have right intention, this is dependently originated. It's qualified. It comes from somewhere. It doesn't actually belong to us. So that intention we have, it's impermanent, and it's not ours. So yes, we have intention, but no, it doesn't belong to you. And I don't like, it's not actually, these two things don't actually oppose each other. The concept of how can I see intention is not mine, and how can I simultaneously cultivate right intention? Because to understand that intention isn't yours, actually that leads to nekama sankappa. So you have the intention of renunciation. So it's not yours, and you want to give up. So to know that intention is dependently originated is conducive to right intention. So thank you, Adrian. It is in fact avihimsa. Okay, great. Yeah, I might have been like tossing up, was it vihimsa or avihimsa? So at least Adrian's on the ball. Back when I was at Newbury, I was either facilitating or teaching fairly regularly. But I had a bit of a hiatus after coming to Sydney. So I'm really enjoying actually just being back with the group. Because otherwise, not everything's at the top of your head. So were there any other questions about this Anatta Lakkhana section? Because, I have to ask the Bhante Sujato question. This is the Bhante Sujato question. If you have a hand and your hand is the 5 khandhas, so the 5 khandhas being Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, which one of the fingers is consciousness? So you have to ask these questions to see who's awake. Any ideas in the chat? Check it out there. Which one's consciousness? Adrian says, is it the middle? None of them? Okay. Yeah, interesting. Because, this is a question without an answer. That's why Bhante Sujato likes to give it to people, because it's not, you can't find this in the Sutta Pitaka. It's not in the Pali Canon. This is something that's come out of Bhante's imagination. So when I first got this question, I said, it must be the little finger, right? Because consciousness is very subtle. But Bhante said, no, actually, if you hold your hand like a fist, consciousness is the thumb, which holds everything together. But, is it the middle? The middle one's the longest one. But I suppose it depends how you construct the analogy, doesn't it? Like which one is consciousness? But I'm not really sure that, I mean, if one of them has to be vijnana, I think like where we were going with the making a fist thing is that vijnana is actually in there somewhere as opposed to being external. So, I mean, once you've made the fist, and this is the khandhas. You know, actually, it's difficult to make a fist. It's difficult to keep it all together. It requires some intention and you know, it's hard. So what do you do to relax? You have to let go. So actually, it's easier to relax than to hold on. It's in the end, you know, letting go is actually easier for us to actually release that fist and let go of the khandhas. So thank you for those of you who are following and still awake. That's great. Where were we up to? Oh, Majjhima Nikaya. That looks cool. Majjhima Nikaya 28. See, this looks like one of the elephant footprint discourses. Maybe it looks probably like the Mahahatipadopama Sutta or something. Either that or the Chulahatipadopama. I'm not 100% certain. The Chulahatipadopama, you know, the shorter simile of the elephant's footprint, being the first discourse which was taught in Sri Lanka by Mahinda, the Arahant Mahinda, the Ashokan missionary. Okay, so giving some definitions. The form component of existence. And what is the form component of existence? It is the four great elements and the physical qualities derived from the four great elements. And what are the four great elements? They are earth, water, fire, and the air element. Okay, interesting. Because normally when you introduce this content to people, when you say the four great elements, you know, everyone's seen the periodic table, right? So this tricks their head a little bit because they think, you know, if the Buddha was so enlightened, how come the Buddha didn't know about, you know, like radium or any of the things on the periodic table? Actually, I don't even know if radium's on the periodic table, but I assume it is. So what we actually have here, we have a pre-modern scheme. You know, so when we actually look at this scheme of saying forms made up of the four great elements, unless we were brought up with like ancient Greek thought or ancient Indian thought, we shouldn't just assume that we actually know what these things mean and that they mean, you know, the same thing to us as they might have meant in a pre-modern context. So, you know, how did, like, what did science mean before microscopes? Before microscopes, science meant, thanks, Adrian. I thought it was the Mahahatipadopama Sutta. Okay, wonderful. So, yeah, before microscopes, science meant observing the physical world around us. So the earth element, you know, it's that which, you know, we can see has the qualities of earth. The water element is that which we can see has the qualities of water. The fire element is that which we can see has fiery qualities. The air element is that which we can see has like air-like qualities. And in Abhidharma, these things are given slightly more technical definitions, but my understanding is that the sutta-based definition isn't actually that technical. It's just about something you can physically, you know, that you can observe with your senses. So, I mean, in terms of the scheme, you know, taken on its own, like according to its own internal logic, it is actually a reasonable scheme, as long as we understand that we're not, when we say the earth element, we're not talking about like atoms, like earth atoms that exist out there. What we're talking about is what we can observe to have this particular quality. So, I mean, that's a fairly reasonable thing to say, that some things are earth-like, some things are water-like, some things are fire-like, and some things are air-like. But just to be aware that it is actually a pre-modern scheme, and not to think that it's somehow deficient because the language it's using is pre-modern. Because, you know, obviously these are pre-modern texts, you know, like the they're going to be using schemes that would have made sense in the social context in which they originated. So obviously in our bodies, there are things that are earth-like, you know, the bones, they're like earth because they're hard. The skin, the hair, you know, all of these things have the earth element, like the water element, things like urine, anything, blood, anything that's watery, fire, digestion, you know, that's like the fire element in the body, the air element. I mean, we have spaces between our nostrils and things. So that's the 4 great elements. They say the Mahabhuta. You know, one of the famous Sri Lankan bhikkhu teachers of the 20th centuries, Venerable K. Jnanananda, used to say, we call them Mahabhuta because this word Bhuta can also mean a ghost. So they're like ghosts in that no one's ever seen them. So all we can say is that we've observed a quality. We've observed an earth-like quality. We can't say that we've actually seen the ghost. We can't say we've seen an earth atom. That's not the real meaning of Bhuta in this context, by the way. But it's, you know, it helps us to make sense philosophically of what's actually meant by an element here. So we have the 4 great elements, the Mahabhuta, and the physical qualities derived from the 4 great elements. So, sure, we have these qualities we can observe in the physical world, but then we also have some things which are a bit like more abstract, that are abstractions from the physical world. So we talk about things like the male element, the female element, like what's actually meant by that. It's a bit harder to place it in terms of, you know, just that purely physical experience. So we talk about elements and physical qualities derived from the 4 great elements. And again, you know, in Abhidhamma, the physical qualities derived from the 4 great elements assume more importance. But actually, even in the suttas, you know, they're there too, but maybe not explicated in such a great degree of detail. So reading on, so that's body. So where would sickness fall in the 4 elements? Thanks, Carolyn, for that question. So actually, according to like pre-modern medical schemes, for example, like say, for example, in Chinese medicine, it's quite common to categorize illnesses according to like which element they affect. So like say, for example, if I had dry skin, maybe that would be a disease of the water element because the water element's been disturbed. And I think in Ayurveda, you know, you have like body types. You have like Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So it's a kind of, you know, it's a kind of more systematized way of linking the 4 elements to a physiological experience, where you say actually someone who has a Kapha body type, you know, maybe they have a predominance of like the earth element and the water element. So, you know, what's good for someone who has like this Kapha body type? They should, you know, they should eat foods that are lighter, like salad. You know, they should go for more walk and increase the air element by doing more motion. So it's not necessarily that sickness falls into one of the 4 elements. It's that when we have a sickness, according to traditional medical classifications, we can describe that sickness as being a disturbance of the 4 elements. Yeah, a lack of balance within the 4, perhaps. So lack of balance, disturbance, either way. And again, not necessarily endorsing pre-modern schemes. They have their advantage in that, you know, you don't need a microscope to work out what's going on. It is something you can experience. But I'm not here to argue that things like antibiotics and all of the great things that come from microscopes haven't significantly improved the world. But just to show you that, yes, they're just because something's expressed using a scheme that's pre-modern doesn't mean you can't understand it. Yeah, Zen says, interesting that these 4 elements are part of nature. So yeah, they are nature. And sometimes in the sort of Pitaka, there's also another scheme of like 5 elements or even 6 elements. So quite interesting. So looking at, we're moving on to the Sangha Nikaya. See, this is jumping around a little bit. It's quite interesting that Venerable Nyanatiloka has compiled it this way. Maybe it's that there isn't actually a good definition of each of the khandas, in the suttas, and that's maybe why he's had to compile them from different collections, which is very convenient for us because it means, we don't have to do the research ourselves and jump around and find those. So the experience Vedana component of existence, there are these 3 types of experience Vedana. What 3? Pleasant experience through any of the 6 senses, unpleasant experience through any of the 6 senses, neither unpleasant nor pleasant experience through any of the 6 senses. These are the 3 types of experience Vedana. So just to break that down more slowly. So we have pleasant experience, unpleasant experience, and neither unpleasant nor pleasant experience. So pleasant experience, I'm sure we've, we know about it, but actually, we think we know about it, but do we really know about it? Because, the Buddha during his lifetime was accused of being like a pleasure seeker. He was accused of being a hedonist. And the Buddha said, actually, we should know about happiness. We should know about the types of happiness, and we should seek inner happiness. So like there's this whole science in Buddhism devoted to dissecting like what actually pleasant experience is. So I mentioned earlier, we can, use those types. One of the types I mentioned was bodily happiness and mental happiness. So like we know about pleasant experience in the world. We know about like eating nice things and, having nice sensual experiences. But the thing, that maybe we don't know about as well as we should is mental happiness. Because, what we teach in Buddhism, is the development of something called jhana, which is, it consists basically of meditation where we have purely mental experiences, where the predominant thing we're experiencing, it's joy and happiness. Up until the 3rd jhana, the 4th jhana has the basis in neutral feeling. So the Buddha said we should actually really make an effort to understand what happiness is and to seek inner happiness. So unpleasant experience, we know about it. Hopefully not too much, I hope. We're having an easy time of things, but unfortunately it's what it is. Again, you could also break that down into 2. You have unpleasant experience based on the body, but we also have unpleasant experience based on the mind. And this whole concept of, how can we have unpleasant experience based on the mind? It's the definition of, monks and nuns, we have suffering too. For people who've really committed to, to formal Buddhist practice, monks and nuns, but also lay people, if you're seriously making an effort. The unpleasant mental experience is the wishing may I be liberated and not being liberated. So that's what we call the niramasa dukkha vedana, the unhappiness that's not tied to sensuality. But hopefully, what we have most of the time we are cultivating the happiness which isn't tied to sensuality. So cultivating the jhanas. Okay, neither unpleasant nor pleasant experience through any of the six senses. So the adukkhama sukha vedana. So not dukkha, not sukha. So neutral. And in terms of like feelings that are related to the body, neutral feeling is just the stuff we just like kind of zone out to on a daily basis. Most of the experience we have, most of the sense experience doesn't actually have any particular type of feeling tone associated with it. And the things that we don't, the things that don't evoke a strong emotional response tend to be the things we just, they don't come onto our like radar of attention, but actually it's the majority of our experience, which is, sometimes reassuring to reflect on that, there's so much going on in life that it's just neutral. But in terms of like the purely mental, neither unpleasant nor pleasant experience, we call that upekkha, that's equanimity. So, in a very formal sense, that would be the fourth jhana. So, due to samvega, due to our turning our attention away from the things in the world, the mind's become calm, it's become disinterested, and we have this wholesome calmness or lack of disturbance that's a result of that purely that mental neutral feeling. So these are the three types of experience Vedana. That might be a good point to wrap up. So I'm just looking at Adrian's question. So Nibbana is also referred to an element in some suttas, right, Ayya. So this term Nibbana Dhatu, I know there is a term Nibbana Dhatu. I'm just trying to find a sutta reference for Nibbana Dhatu because, it's one thing to say that it occurs in the suttas, but that's why Zen's just said it sounds suspiciously Abhidharma. That's what I was going to say, because the suttas are not all the same. There are some books within the Majjhima Nikāya that are slightly later and can actually be described as being proto-Abhidharma. So anything that's really, like, say for example, the Majjhima Nikāya has 3 books. Anything that occurs from book 3 onwards, it's sure it's sutta, right? But it's actually, it's late sutta, it's transitional Abhidharma. And sometimes you do get these really like quirky lists in the later books, like even towards the end of the Digha Nikāya, like the Samgiti Sutta. Like the Samgiti Sutta in particular, it later forms the basis of another book, the Patisambhida Magga. And again, all of these things, that yes, they're in the suttas, but actually what class of literature do they belong to? Really, it's actually Abhidharma. So I've just got it up. So we do actually have a Nibbana Dhatu Sutta. So it's in the Itivuttika. So yes, the term Nibbana Dhatu, Nibbana element, is, Itivuttika is in the Khuddaka Nikāya, but it is found in early texts. I don't think there's much Abhidharma influence on the Itivuttika. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. So it may actually be pure sutta. So, like say for example, the Nibbana Dhatu Sutta in the Itivuttika gives 2 types of nirvana. So the first being, what they call like nibbana with residue. So in Pali, like sa upadisesa nibbana. So the nibbana that the Buddha has with the 5 aggregates. So, what the Buddha realized under the Bodhi tree in the last watch of the night, we can call that one nirvana or nibbana with residue, and the second type being nirvana without residue. So anipadisesa nibbana. So like these nibbana without residue being, you know, the parinibbana, which was realized by the Buddha under the twin sal trees at Kushinaga, you know, when he passed away. So, yeah, there's definitely a term in the Itivuttaka called Nibbana Dhatu. But in terms of what like Dhatu is actually referring to here, we shouldn't take Dhatu in Nibbana Dhatu as referring to a particular type of existence. That would be incorrect. And I have 2 minutes, so I can tell the story quickly. We can talk about the nati cakes. So, you know, in the Dhammapada commentary, there's a story about Anuruddha as a child. And, you know, Anuruddha has actually, you know what, it might be better to save the story for next time because I'm going to mess up the details. But, you know, this concept of what is a nati cake, nati is nothing. So, you know, if you ask the person to open the bowl and you ask, what kind of cakes do you have in there? Show me. And that person says, actually, I have no cakes. You know, that doesn't mean you can open the bowl and see, you know, there's a type of cake in there called no cake. What that means is that the bowl is empty. So like this type of cake where you say, actually, there are no more cakes. It's Ajahn Brahm calls it like the nati cake. There is no cake. So nibbana is a nati cake. So nati is not the name of a cake. It's just what it just means is that there's nothing there. So I hope that, I'm sorry for not being a bit clearer about this term nibbana dhatu, but I hope that can at least give a few little pointers if maybe you'd like to look up further in your own time. Okay, I think we better wrap up there. So thanks everyone for sticking on, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank you
so much, Ayya. That was wonderful. And I hope everyone joins us for next week as well. Same time, same place. Hope to see you all here. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
Thanks, everyone.